Welcome to the great state of Maine. If you've been here before, welcome back. It is great to see so many of you here this morning at this first time in Maine Farm to Institution Summit. The program looks amazing. We are in session, and so because of my legislative duties, I have not been able to completely partake in the offerings of this gathering. But I thank all of you and your organizations for all of your impressive work on this food revolution. I see many familiar places in this room, some that I haven't seen in a mighty long time. I've worked over the last 15 years with many of you, and I remain inspired. I am most grateful to Peter Allison for inviting me to offer these remarks for you today. I wish you well, sir, in the next chapter of your life. And I'd also like to give a shout out to my old and dear sister friend, Gail Burton, sitting right here in front of me, who I haven't seen in too long, for recommending to Peter that this be so. Maine is the first state in the nation to see the light every day. And so this morning, I wish to speak a little bit about that, about Maine's first in the nation efforts to reform and remold and revolutionize food and agricultural policy from the ground up. It's the story that actually only two people can tell. And so I am here to tell about it. Y'all ready? All right. Am I? Let's go big, I declared late one winter evening in 2015. The chips were down, way down. Despite disenchanting legislative losses, we were determined to get right back up. Let's propose a resolution to the Constitution of Maine establishing a right to food. What do you think about that? My declaration to Heather Retberg, organic farmer and mother of 3 beautiful children in Penobscot, Maine, caught her a bit off guard. We had joined forces to bring food sovereignty legislation to the Maine Legislature. She, the Blue Hill Peninsula farmer and leader of a grassroots movement that brought passage of the local food and community self-governance ordinance to several towns in Hancock County. And I, the Central Maine organic farmer at the time, Democratic state representative. We had worked hard together for nearly 2 years to pass food sovereignty legislation in the 126th legislature. That was in 2013 and 14. The following was the testimony that I submitted to the Committee of Oversight when presenting that bill. As former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger once said, control oil and you control nations. Control food and you control the people. Her name was Mrs. Meeks. Well, that was the only name I ever heard her called. I was in her kitchen only once. She, like us, lived on the north side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, smack dab in the middle of factories that made big things and paid good wages. I couldn't tell you if Mrs. Meeks worked in one of them or not, or even if she worked outside of her home at all. All I knew is that she hailed from rural Alabama, and she made a mean coconut cake. So mean, it was the only cake my parents ever bought for a special occasion. We didn't have much. We were on food stamps, in fact. But when we splurged for a special occasion, we turned to our neighbor. And Mrs. Meeks made the best cakes you'd ever want to buy. She made them all in her home kitchen, a place that felt like the hearth in her home that it was. Her reputation preceded her. So much so that when I began teaching myself how to bake a good cake, way back when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, Ms. Meeks was the cake maker that I wanted to emulate most. Why? Because in every single bite of her cakes, you could taste the love. Just as you could taste the love in Aunt Fanny's famous seafood gumbo. Originally from rural Louisiana, Aunt Fanny migrated to Milwaukee after World War II in the Great Migration, her expertise in Creole cuisine in tow. Nobody we knew who wanted gumbo for Christmas ever made their own. They bought hers. Or if they were really lucky, she invited them over to her house, sat them down right at her kitchen table, and served that spectacular ambrosia fresh out of that giant pot. We were among the lucky ones. Still, if we took any of her gumbo home with us, which we always did, my father reached into his wallet and gave her a little something, something. She needed it to help her family make ends meet while caring for a son challenged in so many ways. What on earth do Mrs. Meeks and Aunt Fanny have to do with food sovereignty? Everything, pretty much. And even though they both lived in cities by the time I was able to partake in their culinary wizardry, their values were shaped in rural communities from which they hailed. They were my parents' values, which is why my father shared some of his hunt with our neighbors whenever they needed it. Why my mother fed and bathed countless throwaway girls who knocked on our door, no questions asked. Now, I live in a rural community, a community of people who share my values. After all, they sent me here. I believe locally produced food is national security. I believe that access to wholesome food is a right for every citizen. Oh, you can clap. I ain't mad. I told you, Peter, this could go a minute. When 1 in 4 children among us goes to bed hungry every night, we can do better. We must. We cannot allow a single one of us to go hungry for a single day. Maine has all the natural resources and the hardworking, independent, spirited people to grow, catch, trap, forage, process, prepare, and distribute enough food to feed our people and strengthen our local economies. Let us stop importing more food per capita than any other state in the contiguous 48. I believe the best way to achieve more food self-sufficiency and security in Maine is to allow our neighbors, many of whom are small-scale farmers or small-scale food producers like Aunt Fanny and Mrs. Meeks, to advertise, sell, and feed us the food we want to eat. If you control the food, you control the people. We need real competition, not corporatist state control. People, said Woodrow Wilson, may now be dominated and governed only by their own consent. Self-determination is not a mere phrase. It is an imperative principle of action. Food sovereignty equals self-determination. Who decides? Who gets to decide the rules and regulations about what you put in your body? Who do you trust? The multinational biotech companies that so desperately want to control our food supply by genetically engineering seeds and patenting those same seeds, and then influencing the FDA and the USDA to create policies that serve to drive small food producers out of business? Do you trust the food system that allows chickens to be slaughtered at a rate of 175 per minute with minimal human oversight, the carcasses dipped in bleach and chemical brines in order to make them fit for human consumption? A food system that allows for hamburger filler to be washed in ammonia in order to kill E. coli and make that meat fit for your child's consumption? Or do you trust the person in your neighborhood or around the corner or in your greater community who produces food with wholesome local ingredients and heaping bowls of love? If you control the food, you control the people. I'm a farmer who still works the land by hand. I've never been more committed to anything in my life, never been happier. There is simply nothing like living off the land and nothing simpler. Knowing exactly where your food comes from because you produce it yourself. I am truly blessed. My customers appreciate every bag of spinach, jar of yogurt, or crown of broccoli they get from my farm, and I appreciate them. Their concerns and requests, their own gardening triumphs and failures, our exchange of ideas and recipes and tricks. I never would have imagined that I would become such an integral part of a local food system. Never would have imagined that I could sell thousands of dollars of organic produce and homemade foods in a single season directly to patrons on the side of the road without vending at a farmer's market or even supplying a restaurant. Never would have imagined folks would stop by simply to thank me for what I'm doing, even though they get their food somewhere else. I think now of Michael Pollan's words from his must-read book, In Defense of Food, quote, "In a short food chain, food reclaims its story and some of its nobility when the person who grew it hands it to you." If the Maine people, through their representatives, make a stand on who has the right to make the rules for their own food, then how can we go wrong? Food sovereignty is home rule for food. Food sovereignty is rural economic development. Food sovereignty means farmers and fishers have first rights to local and regional markets. Food sovereignty means empowered communities all over the state working together to advance food systems that ensure health and dignity for all Maine people. Food sovereignty means that people will have access to wholesome, locally produced food. Food sovereignty means that farm workers, farmers, ranchers, and fishers will have control over their lands, water, seeds, and livelihoods. Let us act unanimously. I ask you to vote all to pass to codify the principles of food sovereignty into law, affirming the right of local communities to govern their food systems as they see fit. That was about the size of it, but the size of the vote had been too small to see that through the finish line the first time. How could it be that members of the legislature didn't understand the fundamental power of food rights, food justice, and democracy in a state as libertarian as Maine? Fueled by fire after falling short on that first effort, I wanted to take the conversation to the next level. I sought to amend the most fundamental form of law. No way, brother, we can win that. That's too tall an order, Heather replied finally. Are you really saying we should try to amend the state's constitution? Why not? I mean, if you peel back the onion down to its core, isn't that really what food sovereignty is all about? Ensuring that the people of Maine have a right to the food of their own choosing from the sources of their own choosing? In unison, we said yes, and so we went for it. And on November 2nd, 2021, after 3 tries, several versions, the people of the great state of Maine ratified right to food into the Declaration of Rights of the Maine Constitution with nearly 61% of the vote, becoming the first state in the nation to enshrine food rights in the state constitution. This is a story of the grassroots, of friendship and collaboration. This is a story of bipartisanship, defiance, and reclamation. This is a story about the politics of food for Maine's future, about people in rural America protecting themselves from extinction. Food is water. Food is soil. Food is light. Food is nourishment. Food is medicine. Food is life. You can imagine my surprise then, some years ago, when I discovered that state and federal agencies and courts in this country had yet to recognize the right to food as a fundamental liberty right. In fact, as recently as 2010, the Food and Drug Administration argued in a federal court brief that we have no right to consume or feed our children any particular food, that there is, quote, no deeply rooted historical tradition of unfettered access to foods of all kinds, and that people have, quote, no right to their own bodily and physical health, and therefore cannot obtain any food they wish. Did y'all know that? That's what they said. Well, I disagreed. And so I offered up this testimony on the right to food amendment the first time I presented that bill to the committee. Our ancestors ate wild turtle soup, steamed snails, fried grasshoppers, fire-roasted grubs, and raw fish eggs, and lived to tell about it. Our ancestors figured out how to make hog intestines, pig feet, beef tongue and brains, chicken hearts, thymus glands, and pork belly taste good, and lived to tell about it. Fast forward several centuries, and the government agencies that were supposed to ensure food safety didn't seem to care much about the quality of the meat available in the neighborhood grocery stores during my childhood in Milwaukee. For exchange of our hard-earned money and our food stamps, the only chicken available would be so yellow with age and degradation, my mother would soak it overnight in vinegar and lemon water to kill whatever might live on it, then stew it for hours in a pressure cooker to kill anything else. 20 minutes later, before dinner, she would drop dumplings into that savory pot liquor and build a part of heaven smack dab in the middle of our kitchen. We lived to tell about it. The only beefsteaks and pork chops available at that same store were so gray, we felt safe to eat them only after they were charred past well done in the oven's bottom broiler. and then smothered in homemade gravy and sauteed wild mushrooms that our neighbors harvested on weekend camping trips. We lived to tell about it. When yellow chicken and gray beef steaks were among the only animal protein choices available to us at the store, it was no surprise then that my father would go hunting with other fathers in our neighborhood to score possum, raccoon, squirrel, and rabbit, all of which went into the pressure cooker with his garden-grown carrots, potatoes, celery, and onions to create a wild game stew so good I could never eat enough. I swear I thought I was going to become one. Or he would fish for perch or trout in Wisconsin's pristine lakes, slow cure the fish, sometimes whole, sometimes filleted, in his backyard hand-built smoker for longer keeping. We lived to tell about it. Sister Heather testified to it like this: when our bodily and physical health is not legally our own, when the agency that is increasingly controlling more and more of our food supply states that our right to our own health, our right to feed our children and ourselves food of our choosing is not a fundamental right, and they prevail in court, the people are not served. Right to food is an important step to serve the people, to protect our right to our bodily health, our right to access foods of our choosing, and to feed our children what we deem best. Our access to food, our right to life, our right to the founding of life, seed, is increasingly legally controlled by corporate food monopolies. And when they sue, the law is often on their side. The people lose. We lose our access to food integrity, to our own bodily and physical health. Right to food gives the people legal standing in court. It gives us legal protection when there are aggressive lawsuits that inhibit our ability to access healthy food or to grow and exchange the food or the seeds of our choosing. The time has come when we need this articulated and protected under the Constitution. An exciting way forward lies before this committee today. Given the stark, sober numbers of Mainers who go hungry, the impetus was strong to build a bridge in policy and tangible laws that would beneficially impact us in Maine to address the growing chasm between food policy and agricultural policy. Why were we losing so many smallholder farms and farm acreage, even as the numbers of hungry people in Maine go up? Our first attempt to pass right to food in Maine was born out of this mire. I had been appointed House Chair of the Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, which gave me the power to schedule bills for public hearing. We advocated and mobilized and organized. Joe Salatin of Polyface Farms in Virginia, who caught our attention with his appearance in the seminal documentary Food Inc., came to Maine and electrified the committee room. He told them, more food choice, more food producers, more community and food bed options increases food competition, food availability, food price, and ultimately benefits everyone, including the hungry. I can't imagine a more basic human right, he said, a more bipartisan issue than protecting my right to choose my body's food. Who could possibly think that such freedom of choice should be denied? We allow people to smoke, shoot, preach, home educate, spray their yards with chemicals, buy lottery tickets, and read about the Kardashians. Wouldn't you think we could let people choose their own damn food? It's time to give back the food freedom our ancestors enjoyed, because freedom is not a focus group exercise. If we can't taste freedom, we can only talk about it, and that leaves liberty hollow. It's time for us to embrace the innovation and food security solutions that enshrining a fundamental right to food engenders. A modern day version, I would say, of an age-old truth told in the highest court in the land. No deeply rooted historical tradition of unfettered access to foods of all kinds. That's an argument in favor of a failed paternalistic food policy served up with a steaming pile of revisionist history. Back in 1888, Supreme Court Justice Stephen Field argued on the losing side, but he said anyway, quote, "I have always supposed that the gift of life was accompanied with the right to seek and produce food, by which life can be preserved and enjoyed in all ways not encroaching upon the equal rights of others. The right to procure healthy and nutritious food and to manufacture it is among those inalienable rights which no state can give and no state can take away. It is involved in the right to pursue one's happiness." And so after all that inspiration and mobilization and compromise, the House of Representatives passed the measure with a 2/3 vote. But the Senate chair of the committee, Republican Senator Peter Edgecombe of Caribou, believed right to food was the most dangerous concept he had ever heard of in his entire long life. And he convinced his colleagues in the upper chamber to reject it out of hand. We lost. Heather was right. The force was not with us. There was no way we could win. And so we tried again to gain ground on food sovereignty in the next section, the 128th Maine Legislature in 2017. Then Democratic Senate President Troy Jackson of Allagash, an early opponent of food sovereignty who finally came to Jesus, agreed to sponsor the legislation. We linked food sovereignty with water sovereignty as a matter of local control and presented a bill to another committee, the Committee on State and Local Government. Poland Springs pushed back hard, and I mean hard, and we stripped water sovereignty from the bill before it even got out of my mouth. Under the leadership of Republican Senator Paul Davis of Sangerville, who chaired both the Committee on State and Local Government and the Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, the legislature put food sovereignty on the governor's desk. Based on pressure from commodity agricultural trade associations and their memberships, Republican Governor Paul LePage threatened to veto the bill to my face. But I executed some political jujitsu, capitalizing on a 5-year relationship that I had cultivated with the controversial man in the Blaine house. At the last minute, and in a story only be told in the next book I write, I forced the governor's hand. I gave him no choice. LePage signed Legislative Document 725, an act regarding local control regarding food systems, into law on June 16, 2017. Almost immediately, however, Walt Whitcomb, his commissioner at the time, who disagreed with him and vehemently opposed food sovereignty, called in the USDA to help try to reverse our victory. Invoking the power of the Federal Meat and Poultry Inspection Acts, the Secretary of Agriculture threatened to take over inspections of Maine's meat and poultry processing facilities if the legislation took effect as written. We had 90 days to deal with this crap. And so we worked with President Jackson, who agreed to sponsor the emergency bill, Democratic Speaker of the House, Sarah Gideon, Democratic Attorney General at the time, Janet Mills, and Governor LePage to get the language right. LePage called an emergency session for Halloween. Days earlier, the ACF committee convened to deliberate the devil in the details. The people showed up en masse for the public hearing and work session. The Maine Dairy Industry Association introduced an amendment that would gut the statute from the inside out, but the table had been turned. Democratic Representative Danny Martin of Sinclair sidelined that amendment with a furrowed brow and some pretty stern words amounting to pretty much, "How dare you?" Still, the committee remained at an impasse. And so, Republican Senator Russell Black of Wilton, a maple syrup producer, ordered 3 strong-willed men to go away and hash out a way forward. In retrospect, it seems odd that 3 people from such different perspectives on food and agricultural policy, Democratic Senator Jim Dill of Old Town, Republican Senator Jeff Timberlake, who just called me, by the way, of Turner, and myself, got together in a back room with 2 legislative analysts and forged a compromise that ultimately, only hours later, earned a unanimous vote in the committee, and days later, a unanimous vote in the entire Maine legislature. Everybody's green light went up. Governor LePage signed the Maine Food Sovereignty Act into law on Halloween 2017. As my wise mother was wont to say, go further, do better. In 2019, during the 129th legislature, we tried right to food again because I just didn't want to stop. Billy Bob Falkingham, that's his name, a Dowd East lobster man and lover of liberty, had shown up in the House of Representatives and vowed his support for right to food from the get-go. He had me at hello. We formed an unlikely bond based on mutual admiration and respect. Although we couldn't be further apart on most matters of public policy, we were thick as thieves on food sovereignty, food rights, and even some criminal justice reform. Billy Bob Falkingham of Winter Harbor vowed to convince his Republican colleagues that no freedom could be so fundamentally vital to protect than our right to food. If the resolution failed once again, he vowed to introduce it in the House of Representatives a third time in the 130th Legislature because I would have termed out by then. And so Heather and I included in the second version the language of human rights, food sovereignty, food freedom, and freedom from hunger. We elevated the language of natural resources protection into constitutional lyrics, and that resolution read as follows: all individuals have a natural, inherent, and unalienable right to food, including the right to acquire, produce, process, prepare, preserve, and consume the food of their own choosing by hunting, gathering, foraging, farming, fishing, gardening, saving and exchanging seeds, or by barter, trade, or purchase from sources of their own choosing for their nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being, as long as an individual does not commit trespassing, theft, poaching, or other abuses of private property rights, public lands, or natural resources in the acquisition of food. Furthermore, all individuals have a fundamental right to be free from hunger, malnutrition, starvation, and the endangerment of life from the scarcity of or lack of access to nourishing food. That was the best expression of the right to food then and now, if I say. But we had to heed the advice of a policy analyst who suggested that we broaden the amendment's language instead of keeping it so specific. We couldn't secure the votes if we kept the freedom from hunger clause because too many people thought that meant the government would have to buy all your food. And so we remoted the language into this: all individuals have a natural, inherent, and unalienable right to food, including the right to save and exchange seeds, and the right to grow, raise, harvest, produce, and consume the food of their own choosing for their own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being, as long as an individual does not commit trespassing, theft, poaching, or other abuses of private property rights, public lands, or natural resources in the harvesting, production, or acquisition of food. We forged compromise with naysayers and skeptics. On the precipice of back-to-back victories, the COVID-19 pandemic shocked the system, shut down the legislature, and the resolution never received a final vote for passage in either chamber. And so we tried once more. Falkingham, true to his word, introduced the resolution to the 131st legislature after I had termed out. Same version as last. As Republican Representative Justin Fecto wrote in his testimony in favor of that resolution's version, he said, while most bills are simple text written in statute in order to convey a message, this resolution to establish a right to food is pure poetry. Whether it is the theory of evolution or creationism, the right to food is the original right of all living beings. This isn't a bill. This isn't a resolution, it's a manifesto of our original right. It's a public health statement. It's an affirmation of our relationship with Mother Earth, and it speaks to the spirit of Maine. As God would have it, and thanks to an unexpected special election victory in March of 2021, I showed up in the Maine Senate right on time. Right to Food would finally get a vote in the Senate. And even that wasn't easy. The people of Maine had been asserting pressure that percolated from the ground up and from within the State House. It would take the bare shelves of the grocery stores in the early months of the pandemic to lay bare the near total dependence, the vulnerability of Maine's food system to external shocks. During the pandemic, Maine's Bureau of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Resources virtually suspended all food licensing regulations, allowing food sovereignty principles to spread across the state faster than the virus, clearly understanding the need for farms and food producers to save their shirts while providing local food to people too afraid to go to the grocery store. People who wanted to support Maine's small businesses when they needed support the most. Ultimately, the need to make food and agricultural policy a priority became painfully palpable. Right to food remains a necessary foundation to align those policies for the benefit of all of Maine's peoples. And so we went into overdrive to compel colleagues to see the urgency of now, of ensuring food as both a human right, universal in nature, and a fundamental individual liberty right. We worked relentlessly. We even had to walk the plank on an 11th hour attempt to kill the resolution on a partisan procedural vote in the Budget Committee before Right to Food could even get its day in the Senate. But partisanship did not prevail. Receiving word from the Secretary of State that funding had been secured to print the ballot, Billy Bob and Senate President Jackson got to work whipping votes on the Budget Committee. Representative Fecto, in his final act before resigning from office to move out of state, broke ranks with Republican leadership, made the motion, voted with Democrats, and sent the resolution forward. I had to secure 2 necessary votes from 2 colleagues, one Republican and a Democrat, over dinner at a local restaurant while the Senate was in an extended recess. When we reconvened, Right to Food was up first. Is the Senate ready for the vote? Troy Jackson, the president, looked at me, seeing if I would rise and give remarks before the vote. But my heart was racing, sweat beads were trickling down my face. I could not rise to speak. My feet were stuck in the mud. I thought I might be having a heart attack. It was nearly 2 a.m. Falkenham had already left the building, furious over the stunt his party tried to pull in the Budget Writing Committee on his own bill. The president opened the vote. It felt like forever before those votes lit up the board. I voted last. 23 green lights, 10 red. The motion prevailed. Hell yeah. We won the day, moving 75% of the entire Maine legislature to recommend to the people the ratification of a constitutional right to food at the ballot box. During the summer and fall campaign leading up to the vote, in the face of agribusiness fear-mongering and animal welfare fake meat conspiracies, an unlikely alliance of Heather Spalding and Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, the Back to the Land crowd, and David Trahan, the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, the Into the Woods gun crowd, moved heaven and earth. Ballot question 3 was trashed by all the major media in Maine. The 2 largest newspapers wrote scathing editorials in opposition to the amendment, featuring arguments that betrayed a painful misunderstanding of what a constitutional right does and does not do. A few reporters, however, took notice of the liberal-conservative Mafka-Sam alliance in support of question 3 and wrote more objective stories about its potentially positive impact on the people of Maine. Even though we could not secure the endorsement of the board of directors of the Good Shepherd Food Bank, the state's largest charitable feeding organization, we enjoyed early and ongoing support from Why Hunger, with Allison Cohen at the helm, and Professor Denise Cordova Montez and her amazing law students at the University of Miami Law Human Rights Clinic. We invoked the words of Henry Kissinger. I said earlier, if you control the food, you control the people. We invoked the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, who told us if you can feed yourself, nobody can push you around or tell you what to do. We invoked the words of my mother, who said every tub stands on its own bottom. We moved left and right, rural and urban, coastal and mountain, young and old. We moved the masses to the ballot box to decide the ultimate question: do you favor amending the Constitution of Maine to declare that all individuals have a natural, inherent, and unalienable right to grow, raise, harvest, produce, and consume the food of their own choosing for their own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being? So asked question 3, and on November 12th, 2nd, 2021, with a vote of 249,273 to 160,440, the people of Maine say yes. Yes, indeed. The rest is American history, y'all. We celebrated. Because, you know, when I grew up, you were told you celebrate every single victory you have. And even if you lose the war, you have to celebrate all the victories. We watched the election returns come in at Mafka's headquarters in Unity and at our farm in My Slice of Heaven in Winthrop. We broke bread at Sam's headquarters in Augusta and the Halcyon Grange in Blue Hill. We ate roast chicken and corn chowder, lobster stew and seafood gumbo, pickled fiddleheads, braised collards, apple crisp, fried chicken, and coconut cake. We drank Maine beer and wine and hard cider. We laughed and cried and gave thanks. We got drunk on love. How sweet that was. In the meanwhile, and to this day, in towns and cities across Maine, the local food and community self-governance ordinance continues to spread. Heather Retberg and Bonnie Preston of Blue Hill, now deceased, may she rest in peace, traveled from town to church fellowship halls, to granges and public hearings and town meetings. Food sovereignty has grown from 5 teeny tiny towns in Hancock County in 2011 to more than 135 in 2025, encompassing more than 1/5 of Maine's population and 1/5 of Maine's organized municipalities. In 2021, the legislature authorized county commissioners to adopt local food ordinances on behalf of the unorganized territories and plantations in their county. The first food sovereignty farmers market opened in Aroostook County last year. Now, the Maine Food Sovereignty Act can be a powerful implementation tool for right to food in every part of the great state of Maine and across the country. We never gave up. We never gave in. We defied the odds, a hostile press, a terrified industry, and persevered. The day after victory, the three of us reflected on the blessing. On the Right to Food for Maine social media page, Billy Bob wrote, "With more than 61% of the vote, I am overwhelmed with excitement to share that Maine will be the first in the nation to constitutionally protect food freedom. Voting for a constitutional amendment that I sponsored was quite an amazing experience, but I give all my glory to our Lord and Savior. I also want to share this glory with all the grassroots supporters who gave up their nights and weekends to fight for food freedom, as well as the amazing multi-partisan support in the legislature and at the ballot box. Our country and our politics seem more divided than ever, but Right to Food brought Democrats and Republicans together. Maine people love their freedom and their self-sufficiency, and to them, that's not political. Once again, the Maine people shut the door on DC lobbyists from away and chose liberty. Maine's rural and independent families know what it's like to feed their families high-quality food. When they look at their children and grandchildren, they want them to have it the same way, the way life should be." Heather wrote, "We brought forward from the towns and cities of Maine to the legislature and to the ballot box an opportunity to secure in perpetuity a right to food, including the right to save and exchange seeds. We were cautious to steward our own natural resources, public lands, and private property, including animals, from abuse. We entreated our friends and neighbors all across the 16 counties of Maine. Let the people say yes, and the people of Maine said, hell yes. Mainers' aptitude for authenticity, sensibility, and integrity shone forth. We said Maine is at the end of a long supply chain, importing more than 95% of our food. We have a 14% rate of food insecurity, and 1 in 5 of our children are hungry. We still have empty store shelves as the pandemic stretches on, but we also have the land and water resources to grow much more of our own food. Let us be more resilient. Let us grow our food self-sufficiency instead of our vulnerable reliance on systems outside of our control. We said systemic problems needed structural change. Let us erect a new foundation. From there, we will build a better food system in Maine." The people of Maine said yes. We asked God to bless the grass that grows through the cracks, to bless the truth that fights toward the sun, bless the grass that's gentle and low. Its roots, they are deep. Its will is to grow. God bless the truth, the friend of the poor, and the wild grass growing at the poor man's door. And God bless the grass. God did bless this effort to a more resilient Maine. Mainers put the foundation in place. Now let us build. And I wrote, the answer is yes. Now what's your question? Voters proved why I have so much faith in the people of Maine. We are unbought and unbossed, and nobody is going to get between Mainers and our food. You cannot buy our votes or trick us with lies, deceit, and nonsense. Besides, it's always a good idea, but especially in times like these, to secure and protect an individual right in the world we live in. Food is life. I don't understand why anyone would be afraid to say so out loud and write it down in the most fundamental form of law. Where I come from, you don't grow up dreaming that someday you'll be in a position to inscribe your own words on the pages of a Constitution. But I am here to tell about it. As the original sponsor of Right to Food in 2015 and again in 2019, as a writer and a poet, I am most humbled that the legislature and the people of Maine at the ballot box reflected back the independence and love for freedom and self-sufficiency that brought me to this place I call heaven nearly 25 years ago. We have enshrined the right to food, the original right of all living beings, and reaffirmed that all power is inherent in the people. Thank the Lord. Right to food is about food self-sufficiency that engenders food security. Right to food is about self-determination that uplifts human dignity. Right to food is about individual liberty that promotes personal responsibility and makes resilient community. Imagine being more afraid of freedom than subservience and dependency. Right to food is the way life should be. And so now it must become one of the highest considerations for policymakers at all levels of government in crafting public policy that uplifts the dignity and worth of every human personality. I look forward to working with anybody from any party or any ideology anywhere in the great state of Maine or across this great nation to build upon the firm foundation of a constitutional right to food. Let us begin. Let's do it. And so it was. The two legislators from the two major political parties and the sister mother of the food sovereignty movement, two farmers and a lobster man, a triumvirate, if you will, successfully turned the tide. At last, right to food has come to America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Peter.